get everything going here and let me mark it. Okay, so what were you saying, Grandma?
Okay, so while we were living in Highland Park and then South Pasadena, and I was anywhere from ages 8 to 14.
Yeah.
Every summer, Dad would pack up the kids that weren't out working from like Doris on, I know Jack, I can remember Jack and Stan, even Bert being there some summers, which was in Newport Beach in a little RV park, you might want to call it, called Bayshore, which had a big bridge going across the bay. So we would make our own tent that was probably about 20 by 20 square with 2x4s holding up the walls of the tent, which were old drop cloths nailed to the 2x4s.
Okay.
Some of those drop cloths even had spattered paint on them.
So you knew they were paint drop cloths.
But we didn't care. So we were down at the beach where there was always a cool ocean breeze and a bay with very quiet water where you could learn to swim and float on the waves. And that's where I learned to swim.
Okay.
And so we could walk out to this little raft about 30, 40 feet from the edge of the water, and we could walk out there and then dive in and swim to shore. Well, I couldn't swim, but I did walk out there with my older brothers, and suddenly we'd been dog paddling, but suddenly Bert said, well, let's see if you can swim to shore. And so he threw me in, and I did swim to shore. And that's when I found out, yeah, I can swim over in water that's over my head. But, so we had lots of fun there, lots of memories there. And stubborn Doris, I can talk about her now because she's gone. But, okay, so it came time every summer to pack up, go home to Monterey Road in Highland Park,
Yeah.
or South Pasadena. We're all packing up, we're all going home, but where's Doris? Nobody can find Doris. Well, Doris hid because she didn't want to go home.
Oh.
And they went home without her.
About how old was she at that point?
She was probably about maybe 12.
But she looked 18 because she's...
Yeah, and she had made
6 feet
friends
tall.
down there. So what she did, she stayed with this family of friends she had made. And she didn't tell them, hey, my family's moving and going back to South Pass. But when they found out that the family had left, then they somehow made contact and they came back and got Doris. But she had a mind of her own. So that was one of the things that I remember about going to the beach every summer. And we'd all sleep like on mattresses, nothing fancy. And this part I do remember is that, Dad would send money every week to Mom, and she would go to the little store down there and get her groceries. Well, I can remember her saying one week, if your dad doesn't send some money, I don't know what we're going to eat, because I'd run up credit at the store, and they said, no more credit. And apparently he finally came through with some money, but I know she was really worried about where's the next bit of money coming from. And I think she did confide in me sometimes about things whether she did that with all the children or not, I don't know. But I do think I was one of her favorites.
Oh, yes. You were her favorite 10th child. Yes.
Because this is very, very unusual for her to do, because she had her hands full with raising a family, and from time to time she would be sick. But I do remember on my 9th birthday, when we lived on Monterey Road, we would have to walk a couple miles to catch a streetcar and then go to downtown LA. And so for my birthday, she did take me on that streetcar, just her and I, and go downtown LA. I think there was like an open market place there. I remember she bought me a little toy purse for my birthday, and then we rode back home on the train. And when I tell the rest of my brothers and sisters about that, they said, we never got that. How come you got that? You know. But yeah, so anyway, that's one of the things I do remember. And then as far as when I was 16 and met my future husband, that was downtown LA. On a Saturday, I would go to work at Uncle Fred's paint store. He also used that store as storing paint for his painting crew, which he ran very successfully. So I was working behind the counter, and these two young boys came in. One was Donald Schultz, and the other one was Robert Hillier. Been buddies for like 6 or 8 years. I think Don was probably 17 and a half, about 17 at the time, and I was not quite 16. But at any rate, he introduced himself and said hi, goodbye, then left with Bob Hillier, came back in 2 minutes later. Bob had talked him in to asking me for a date, which I agreed to. So then we started dating, and we did that from like the time I was 16, maybe 6 months. And then suddenly we had World War II had already started, because it started when I was 13. But anyway, he wanted then to enlist in the Navy, which he did at age 17 and a half. I think he wasn't quite 18. And so then he went overseas. He stopped first in Hawaii and sent me a present from Hawaii that, we had so little that when we got anything, we thought it was amazing. And what he had sent that I remember and can see to this day was a little wraparound bathrobe with a big Hawaiian print on it. And I thought, oh boy, we're set, And then he goes into the real war, which is over in South Pacific, Palau, I think it's pronounced. And the letters weren't coming too frequently, but he did send me one letter that said, oh, by the way, did you know I'm engaged to Donna Brumley? And I thought, I'm writing to this man. I thought we had a relationship going, and suddenly he's telling me he's engaged to somebody else. So I thought, well, I'm not writing him anymore. And I didn't, and he didn't write back because I wasn't sending him any letters. And then when I graduated in June of 46, I get this phone call almost the same week, and he said, this is Don, I'm back in town, can I come over? And we started dating, and then he told me that when he sent that letter about Donna Brumley, he wrote, did you hear I'm engaged to Donna Brumley? Ha ha. I didn't see the ha ha. That was supposed to be a joke.
Sarcasm there.
Yeah. So anyway, we dated for just a few months, and we decided, we should get married. And by that time, his family, during the war, had moved from LA back to Nebraska. And he says, I've got to leave now, go back and visit my family in Nebraska, but we'll keep in touch. So he did that, and maybe a month went by, and I didn't hear from him, no phone calls. I thought, I got to find out what's going on, because we talked about getting married. So I sent a telegram. I thought, that'll get his attention. And it said, have you changed your mind? And right away I got a phone call. No, I haven't changed my mind, but the family wants to come with me, and they've got to sell their house and pack up everything, and then we'll be out maybe in another month. So they moved back to California to be with Don, didn't have a home, lived in a 14-foot trailer with a cabana with 2 kids, Greta and Pam. Pam was just 2 years old. And so they were living at Newport Beach in this 14-foot trailer. So that when we get married in April, we were both so naive and inexperienced and not too much advice from more experienced people. we got married not knowing where we were going to live, or he didn't have a steady income, but worked as a painter with his dad. And I never asked where are we going to live. Never. We spent our
Crossed
first,
your mind?
and so our first night we did rent a little apartment down at Newport Beach, and then the next day moved in with his family in a 14-foot trailer and lived there for about 4 or 5 months, when finally his dad got so tired of seeing us, he said, "Here, I'll help you buy a trailer of your own," which they did. A very inexpensive one, and we parked it up in South Pasadena. And that's where I got pregnant with Susan, our first child. And she was born, we got married in April of 47, and Susan was born in July of 48. And we actually, her first 6 months was in that trailer that we owned.
And we have photos of.
And then inside, Don had built a crib that fit up against the wall of a corner, but when he built it, the railings were not really high enough to prevent a child that was jumping up and down from jumping over the rail and onto the floor.
Is that what's wrong with me?
And when that happened, I had been watching her do this for a couple of weeks, jumping up and down with the rail, and I said, "Don, we've got to make that rail higher or she might go over." Well, he was going to do that someday,
Yeah.
but he didn't, and I was so angry when she ended up on her head on the floor.
I'm upset about that too now.
So when she was about a year old, then they were building homes for veterans, which were really in demand, all the veterans coming back from the war. A tract home in Norwalk, California, which is right next to Bellflower in Long Beach, California, where we also spent time. And so we bought our first home on the GI Bill. I don't know that we had to pay anything down, but the payments were like $50 a month or
Wow.
something, and the interest was like 5%.
Yeah.
And so that was a 2-bedroom house with 1 bath with a huge backyard. So we were there from the time Susan was 1 till she was like about 5 and a half or 6. She went to kindergarten there. And then by that time Jack had come along, and we decided we needed a bigger house. So we moved to Lakewood, California, which is right next door to Bellflower in Long Beach, California. And that was on a corner with a huge yard.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Huge yard.
Yeah.
And so we stayed there for 35 years.
Yeah.
Until in 1991, 92,
Yeah.
Don and I had retired, and when we moved to Arizona, where I am today. But since that time, Don had passed away with cancer of the bladder in 2004. So I went to a grief support group here in Sun City, Arizona. And I think it was my first time there. This man sat down in front of me, and I could only see his back. And he was telling briefly what happened to his wife, who had died the same week that my Don had died. And then after that group meeting, they go to breakfast, and somebody sat me down next to this man who said, and I sort of interviewed him, because about 5 months had gone by, and I was sort of just looking for someone to have dinner with and go to the show with, whatever. But anyway, so I sort of interviewed him, and he said he'd been married for 57 years to this one woman who for 37 of those years had had multiple sclerosis. And then she had complications from that and a stroke the year before she died. But I thought, gee, he took care of her all those years. Not too many men would do that. He must be a good guy. At least he wasn't divorced a half a dozen times. And so that was that, and he went his way. And ding-a-ling, he went to pay for his breakfast, and I walked out right after him, and I noticed it was hot in the summer, and he was wearing shorts. But the back of his calf had big, deep creases right along the middle of his calf where something had pressed there. And I thought, gee, walking behind him, maybe that man was wearing some kind of a brace or something, and he's left them behind. So I tapped on his shoulder walking behind him.
Scared him.
And he turned around with a grin on his face, and I said, you've got this crease on your leg. Did you have a brace or something that you've left behind? He looked down at his leg and he says, oh, well, I just had pushed it up against the chair, and that's what made the crease. And I said, oh, okay. And he popped up. What a ding-a-ling lady. So then we walked out to the car together, and his car was parked next to my car. Now there's a clue. So, and he said, well, goodbye. And I said goodbye. And then I thought, gee, I really sort of like him. He was friendly and stable. And when you sign in to the grief support meeting every morning prior to the breakfast, you give your name and a phone number only, no address or anything, if you want.
Yeah.
So, and give everybody a list of everybody's name and number so you can call each other for support. And so I thought, well, maybe he'll call me. So 2 days went by, and he didn't call me. So I thought, I've got to have an excuse to call him. So that group was going to have a pizza party in 2 weeks. So I thought, I'll call him and see if he's going to the pizza party. So I called and explained who I was. I said, you probably don't remember me, but I was sitting next to you at breakfast. He says, oh yeah, I remember you. And I said, well, I just wondered if you were going to go to the pizza party. And he said, yeah, I think I will. He said, you want me to come by and pick you up? And I said, yeah, that would be nice, which was only a week away. But then the next day he called and said, do you want to go to the movies? So that was our first date, to go to the movies. And then we just went from there.
Or didn't you have a big glass of wine or something?
Oh, yes. Yes, after the movie, I was so nervous, because if you haven't dated for 57 years and suddenly you're out on a date with somebody you really don't know. So after the movie, we went to the Red Robin to get a hamburger, and I was so nervous. So I thought, I don't usually drink much, but I'm going to order a glass of wine. So I did that. But I didn't sip on the wine. I drank the whole glass straight down. So then I said to Bob, as he was sitting there, I said, I better not stand up. I said, that wine really hit me. So he probably thought he had a cheap date there.
This lady's lush.
So anyway, yeah, so then we just dated for, maybe 6 or 8 months. And
When did you find he had the same ring as Dad? The
I'm
same
sorry?
Masonic ring?
Oh yeah, he did have a Masonic ring on him.
At the first,
Day one, yeah.
Did you pick up his hand and look at it? Or
No, I didn't. I don't think I even noticed that till a couple of dates later that he had a Masonic ring.
The same.
And of course, Don was a Mason, so, similarity there, but anyway, then he wanted to, in August, that was in June, and in August he wanted me to go on a trip to Las Vegas with his Marine friends reunion. And I said, I can't go. I feel like I'm doing something naughty, and we're not even engaged yet.
Doing something naughty.
So, okay, well, I'll buy you a ring if that'll make it better. So
I love these guys rushing out.
So we did go buy a ring, and we went to Vegas and had a nice time. And then in December of that year, we had planned a trip to Hawaii. And we'd been talking about getting married, but Bob was hesitant. And don't ask me why, but I'm sure he must have lots of good reasons. And so then suddenly, as we're talking about the trip, he says, "Why don't we get married over in Hawaii?" And I said, "Well, that sounds good to me. So when we go, I'll call my nephew who lives on the Big Island, Nelson, see if he can do the ceremony, because he's a retired Methodist minister." And Dave said, "Yeah, you can get married on our patio in Honolulu, Waikiki." And so David and Ginny very nicely set up a very small little wedding dinner or refreshments on their patio. They have lots of pictures. So Susie came along, and Bob's daughter Patty came along. So there were like 8 of us there. The minister, Dave and his wife, Bob and I, Susan, and
Nancy.
the
Nelson.
minister's wife, Nancy, and Patty, Bob's daughter.
Oh yeah.
So we were there, sort of a spur of the moment thing, and
Wild and crazy kids.
They're so cute. So
And what'd
happy
you
and
say?
cute.
I said wild and crazy kids.
yes, we were wild and crazy. People don't realize this when you're in a relation or a marriage, 57 years, and then suddenly you're into the dating scene, and you're still, whether you realize it or not, you're sort of like in a fog, a grief, possibly, whatever. When we were dating, we did things, and we went to San Diego to see Sue, and she took us to the zoo, and
You didn't even remember?
a couple of months later, I was talking to her on the phone, and I said, "Sue, Bob and I'd like to come down to San Diego, and we'd both like to see the zoo." And she said, "You've done that already. Don't you remember? I've got pictures to prove it." And we didn't remember, and that shows what kind of a fog we were in.
Right, right.
So basically that's, that was 5 years ago, and we're getting along famously.
That's right. 5 years ago.
And I can't think of anything else unless you have questions, anybody.
Well, let's see.
Well, that's great. Let me stop because I think the recording.